Welcome to the Free the Bear podcast, a podcast devoted to California independence. In our fifth episode, we continue our conversation with Joshua from A New Progressive Voice, and we talk what could have been. What if, instead of nominating Joe Biden, the Democrats had nominated an actual progressive? Would they be ahead in the polls even more than Biden now? Good conversation, so sit back and enjoy, and as always,
Free the bear. Grrr.
So let's pretend for a minute that Joe Biden wins the nomination. What do you guys think a Joe Biden presidency looks like? Josh, I'll start with you.
I think we'll go back to a form of neoliberalism, of course, very similar in the vein of Obama initially, appointment of moderate to liberal Supreme Court justices, some efforts toward climate change, some efforts to get back into the Iran treaty as well as Paris Accord, some work toward sprinkles of progressive policies, for example, maybe looking at minimum wage, tax write-offs, some efforts of trying to rebuild some of the damage that Trump meted out. But other than that, I don't expect too much more. I think more importantly would be looking at it, who he appoints in his cabinet and who is his VP pick and where do we go and how do we adjust to that in 2024. I think it's a segue, a bridge, if you will, more than anything else. Just bringing us back to some degree of, I guess, less insanity.
Josh, if I can say part of me says you're 100% right. I think I agree with those statements, but part of me is just very, very cynical about this whole thing. And I think Joe Biden getting in is pretty much like having our Hindenburg before Hitler. Someone's going to copy the Trump playbook. If Trump got knocked out to the point that actually Joe Biden actually assumed the presidency without, civil conflict, Joe Biden gets into the great seat. We all know there is a mental decline there. We know that Joe Biden is a very middle-of-the-road Democrat. We know that he doesn't understand how the world's changed. He keeps thinking that the Republican Party is the Republican Party of the 1970s and 80s, where we can all kind of compromise and work for some kind of goal that will be maybe muddled, but at least it's an advance. And I think he's going to be made a fool out of. And I think 2 years into his presidency, we're going to have what happened with the Obama presidency 2 years in, where a Tea Party, an AstroTurf organization, which was pretending to be some kind of uprising of Americans suddenly concerned with taxation rates for the major corporations, there's going to be a Tea Party 2.0, and someone smarter than Trump, because I'm assuming, again, Trump has been knocked out. I'm not assuming he's a kingmaker like we talked about earlier. Trump's knocked out, and someone else is going to take the reins, and, you would have a real ugly movement because Joe Biden, I think, will do absolutely nothing. I don't even think minimum wage would be on the scales at all. Joe Biden would just completely pretend that because he's in office, that's already what we need. The progressive movement will lose heart, and the right-wing resurgence will actually take over and really cripple his presidency, and then God knows who we could ever have as president in 2024. I think it could be someone very ugly and very smart, and who would be basically doing the Trump playbook, but doing it in such an expert level that Trump will be relegated to the ash bin of history, and these people are going to be the real danger.
Yeah, I've heard that concern quite a bit. This is a narrative that's been played since back in 2015. And to some extent, we have created self-fulfilling prophecies, particularly progressives, that played into that narrative. Bernie or bust, Yang or bust, whatever, that actually in some way inadvertently leads to that very self-fulfilling prophecy. I think two things that challenge that narrative. One is you have a lot more quote unquote woke people, Bernie Sanders, Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, whoever happened to bring quote unquote truth to them. The second part of this is the generations X, Y, and Z are becoming more mature and getting more involved in politics and beginning to vote at greater numbers, and this trend will continue. And so I would argue that the power dynamics will begin to shift away from the Tea Party and more toward the, for lack of a better word, progressives, and to the degree at which they vote and get involved in politics over the course of the next 4 to 8 years. That would be my counter to that.
Now, looking at how this election is going now, excuse me, what I'm particularly frustrated with is this situation would have been perfect for Andrew Yang, Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders, or Marianne Williamson, where they would have been forced to be doing long-form interviews 24/7. Whereas Joe Biden, he has to be set in a staged environment where it's 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and he still makes mistakes, which frustrates me beyond belief. What do you guys, I don't care which one you go with, but how different do you think it would be right now if there was a progressive as the nominee rather than a moderate like Joe Biden?
You want to go ahead and go, Forbes? I'd have to think about that one.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I just think that if there was a progressive like a Bernie Sanders type, or again Tulsi or whoever, I mean, like there would be a clear, stark contrast between the Trump administration and them. It boggles my mind that right now, like, I'm seeing the polls, and these are national polls, which unfortunately, as 2016 and 2000 elections have told us, the national polls actually don't mean as much. You could be 10, 20 points ahead, but if you don't have those background states, it means jack. But that being said, like, I think a Bernie or Tulsi, I really do think at this point, especially with the rioting, the lack of address of police reforms, I think also the again, like, the kind of very skimpy amounts of money given out to the unemployed, the skimpy amounts given out to the people, the stimulus checks, for example. There would be people who say we should do more. We should fix the police more. We should fix the income more. We should actually, again, redistribute the wealth more. And that, contrast between this, again, lack of a better term, this pig in the White House, they would have 20 or even 30 points ahead. I don't think that the battleground states would even be battlegrounds. I think it would be wipeouts. I think there'd be a clear contrast, because the reason why people went to Trump in the first place was because they felt like he was outside the political system and that he was going to do something different. Hillary Clinton, even though people by pretty good national majority actually favored her, Hillary Clinton was always felt to be part of this insipid, dumb system that was going to be wasting tax money on God knows what, A, or B, actually blowing up parts of the Middle East. And people rejected that, just in enough margins in the battleground states to switch it to Trump. Trump, in my mind, was actually kind of running to the left of Hillary in certain regards. He was being more attentive to the trade issues. He's being more attentive to the Middle East warfare. He was kind of saying, like, I'm not going to keep putting the boys and girls in. So I think that if you had a true progressive who was already, like, to the left of Trump on this stuff, I think they would have they'd be trouncing him right now. But unfortunately, the Democratic National Committee, with I think a lot of shenanigans which will come out in the future. There was a weird thing with the app with like Mayor Pete, for example. Mayor Pete's campaign was behind an app that was used in Vote County in Iowa, which kind of deflected a lot of Bernie stuff. Elizabeth Warren, I do not trust. She kept in the debate, or not in the debate. She was keeping in the race to the point that she was just there to deflect Bernie's momentum. There was a lot of manipulation, and again, if a real kind of true progressive guy actually got in, I think Trump would be so underwater, not even 10 points like Biden is ahead right now. I think he'd be 20, 30. I think it should be a wipeout. Why can't it be a wipeout? I mean, we all know what Donald Trump is. Anyone who's got two working brain cells should be picking up on this. Unless you already have an ideology where you're so hateful towards the other half of the United States that pretty much you want to make them eat dirt. So I don't know. I think it would just be incredible to have a real true progressive. And also, too, I don't think that I would even be on this podcast right now because, frankly, I think I would have some hope for the United States, which I actually don't.
Yeah, I think the way I would answer would be to consider whether or not the going back again, and unfortunately I hate to keep bringing it back to this, but I really think it's greatly overlooked. The youth population votes or not, and whether we have a progressive or not, we had great choices this time around. I can't recall an election where we've had that many progressives running for president, be it Bernie, Tulsi, Williamson, Yang. I think that progressives lack cohesion. Youth generally are not voting at the numbers we need, and what you generally find, boomers by and large do line up with Joe Biden, his philosophy, the way his outlook, and in politics in the world at large. And I think they generally are much more likely to vote. So even if we had a progressive, let's say Bernie won the nomination, I think he'd be posed with a number of challenges. Whether or not he could excite enough people. Definitely they get activated at, canvassing, phone banking, on Twitter. We kind of live in our bubble, YouTube. But how does that translate in the real world? Not a lot of people say because we don't have a progressive, people don't get excited and they don't come and vote. So it's just kind of hard to say. Is it kind of like because they don't vote, or is it, people don't get excited because we don't have an exciting candidate, or is it a little bit of both? So I think that kind of would factor in. And also, lastly, I would say that it depends on what type of progressive candidate you're talking about. For example, Bernie Sanders could, in fact, lend toward further divisiveness in the nation, whereby you have the radical right and the radical left, even though they may be well-intending, and it might lead to a lot of infighting. That might lead to Antifa versus, the red hats, if you will. And then, but if you had someone like Yang or Tulsi that speaks more toward the universal themes, I think that might, be able to perhaps bring about a lot more success than, say, a Biden nominee.
I will tell you guys why I thought Andrew Yang was going to win the nomination. I looked at this and I thought the Democrats were going to have to realize that either Sanders, Gabbard, or Yang were the three people who could beat Trump, who would at least be strong favorites. And I looked at it and said, there's no way they're going to let Bernie be the nominee. And for some reason, they hate Tulsi Gabbard. I know it's because she endorsed Sanders in 2016, but let bygones be bygones. She is literally a perfect candidate when you look at female, veteran. She's articulate. She's divinely beautiful, if you don't mind me saying. She's everything. Like my 8-year-old daughter worships Tulsi Gabbard. Like she thinks she's going to go as her for Halloween this year. So, I mean, and Andrew Yang, I mean, there was an advisor, one of Trump's advisors was in a fundraiser, and he was recorded saying that the one person they feared more than anyone was Andrew Yang. Mm-hmm. So I thought the DNC was going to bite the bullet and say, you know what, we'll take Andrew Yang, who we can work with. But no, they picked Biden. And, I'm not the biggest Bernie Sanders fan. I think he's a great senator. I don't think he has what it takes to be a great executive, if that makes sense. There's been a lot of times where my good friend Joe Biden, where I was like, no, you got to hit Joe Biden. And I even think his campaign, I know I mentioned this to you before, Forbes, he spent too much time going after Pete Buttigieg. It was short-sighted. Like, Pete was going to do well in those first rural white states, New Hampshire and Iowa, but he had no legitimate path to victory. Bernie should have finished Biden when he was on the ropes.
Yeah. But, if I can just say, Bill, the one thing is that there's a subtext you're talking about, which I don't think we brought up, which is that the Democratic Party is part of this establishment in Washington, D.C., right? It is part and parcel of the so-called two-party system, which is really not a two-party system in my mind. It's actually more like it's a one-party system with two wings. If we can just go through history just for a second, like the Soviet Union, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in the late stages, like the 70s and 80s, to the United States, there was two semi-wings of the party. There was the hardliners who wanted to, be hardcore, communist, whatever you say, no reform, no surrender whatsoever. And then you had the reformers like a Mikhail Gorbachev type, right? So we're going to fix things, we're going to change it, be a softer, lighter, more, socialism with the human face kind of thing. I think this is the same thing that's happening in the United States. The two-party system, Democrats and Republicans, are way closer than we think. And I think that a lot of Democrats want to go down and lose to Trump because Bernie Sanders and some of the others, even though they might have been more Democrats than, Sanders was never officially a registered Democrat, so far as I know. They were never going to turn over the reins of power to someone outside their system. And they were doing everything, I think, possible to screw that up. And when it came to, Trump was, already had beat the system in some ways. Trump, again, right or wrong, was, I think, a revolutionary. He was, his track record was he was a Democrat for 8 years. Or actually, no, 20 years or something like that. Back in the 80s, he was a Democrat, and then he switched to the Republicans in, around the Reagan time, I think. Don't quote me on this. And then he switched to the reform thing, which was basically a Ross Perot enterprise. Then I think he switched to a Democrat again in the 2000s. And then, because there was, I think he wrote a book. I don't know what it was called, but he was actually talking about, well, first it was kind of a weird thing. He was talking about we need to invade North Korea. And then the second part was that we need to have universal health care. And so, Trump was a revolutionary who basically busted into the system. But once he got into the system, he basically played ball in one big way, which was, I'm going to really cut the taxes of all these corporate types. I'm going to make sure that all these corporate types get the all the money they need. I'm going to do trickle-down economics on the scale that Reagan could only have a wet dream about. And he went for it. And I think at that point, the establishment, again, Democrats and Republicans, said, well, okay, well, he's helping out our boys. He's actually working for a constituency. Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard comes around, they're going to rock the whole boat. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to blow the election. We're going to make sure we screwed it up because, again, we don't want to have someone to rock this boat. And so, we're not going to have a Bernie Sanders, definitely. And we might run in Joe Biden just in case people are, stupid enough to vote for him. Because if a Joe Biden gets in, he's one of our guys. He's going to play ball. He might make it a little bit softer than Trump, just because we got to placate the rioting mob. But, he's going to be part of us. And, again, he's a man we can do business with because he's been around for, the last, 4,000 years.
Josh, I'll ask you this specifically. I know you know a lot about UBI. How shocked are you that Biden hasn't flopped or changed his stance, considering the COVID-19 virus, considering he wants Andrew Yang's support? Didn't it seem to you I was really shocked that he didn't pivot on that and make it his campaign issue, because he really isn't. I have no idea what he's running on other than he's not Trump.
Yeah, this is all speculation, but I get the feeling that with Joe Biden, he is thinking about keeping his cards close to his chest and kind of bringing things out at the last minute. That's kind of what I've seen his tactic. Just as you saw at the 11th hour, Obama picks up the phone, and then in comes everybody dropping out and endorsing Biden. I think he's got something like that up his sleeves again. I think he doesn't really want to put that out there because he doesn't want it to be sort of stolen by the other side. That's what I'm suspecting. I could be completely wrong. That's what I get, because I keep hearing rumors here and there that he is working with Andrew Yang, and Andrew Yang has brought up that they've had discussions of UBI, and Clinton's considered a UBI. Obama and Biden has invited or met with Andrew Yang prior. So I think there is a potential there for that. So we'll see.
Biden needs to come up with something. He, as bad as Trump is doing, I don't see him winning with Orange Man bad. I don't care if it's infrastructure, some environmental policy. He needs something to beat Trump. And you brought up the point about Hillary Clinton. If you could travel back in time, if Andrew Yang could travel back in time and tell her, like, I was a virtual no one and I came in 5th place on UBI, I guarantee she would have changed it. I didn't really like the name the Freedom Dividend. I loved Hillary's idea of Alaska for America. I thought that was way more catchy. And if she had proposed UBI, she would have trounced Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think there's just reluctance in general because those type of politicians. They're very heavy on posters, and whether or not the American people are on board. Same thing with same-sex marriage. A number of them opposed that until it became the popular narrative. That's the way they tend to think.
I think that we have to be kind of clear about what we're talking about. Like, for example, like, you said, like, if Andrew Yang went back in time, and told Hillary Clinton this, or like, if this happened, or again, like, if Joe Biden adopts this, he's going to trounce Trump. To me, Hillary Clinton in 2016 and Joe Biden clear in 2020, I think, again, in the past, Hillary Clinton did trounce Donald Trump. Joe Biden will trounce Donald Trump. They will. Both of them, I think, will be winners in the sense of the popular vote. They will not be winners by the electoral battleground. That is what we have a problem with, and that is the reason why I've gone back into the California independence movement, is because the system itself, again, which is the system, we say this term all the time, the system. But like the constitutional setup is that these certain states can override our votes. And, Hillary won by 5 million? And even if we just, say the anti-Trump vote, we'll just go with that. Hillary plus the Libertarians plus the Greens is almost 6-8 million votes, something like that. Again, don't quote me on that. But it's not again, it was a squeaker. It was very clear that the American people as a whole, as a population whole, did not want to have Donald Trump whatsoever. That was not happening. And I think Joe Biden could run into the same thing too. I think Joe Biden could win by 10 million votes. But again, if those states are not set up, if the states are not those battleground states, Donald Trump squeaks by 1,000 votes, 50 votes, whatever. If he's got the Electoral College on his side, he can go right through. Which again goes back to why we have a podcast talking about the California independence movement. The system, I think, is almost kind of geared against us. Again, I think that UBI is a great idea in a lot of regards. I think I have some caveats which I haven't really brought up before with Bill, but the general idea of the UBI, I'm 100% for, and I don't think that we can have those kind of changes because any president that runs for it is going to have to run into, again, certain states, which will kind of, push them back. I think that any president runs for it will have to deal with, even if they won those states, they're going to have to deal with the 2 senators from Wyoming, the 5 senators, the whatever, 16, 18, 20 senators from the South, and the southern states who, in some regards, not all of them, but if you had a collection of them, don't even equal Los Angeles County. That's an issue. That's a major issue of how we look at politics when we start going through that prism.
My proposal for the election reform first would be ranked choice voting. But I've never heard anyone say this. I think it might be my own idea. I think if a state is won by 60% or more, all the delegates should go to the person who won. If it's less than that, it should be split. I don't like the electoral, college as it is because, of the flaws that you mentioned. My concern with a popular vote is that rural America will be forgotten. It'll be campaigning in New York. The Democrats will campaign in New York, LA, San Francisco, Seattle, and Republicans will be campaigning in Florida and Texas. And I see that as a problem. But at one point, and I guess I'll leave my last statement of this episode. I'll quote the great Patrice O'Neill, may he rest in peace. Why is there a North and a South Dakota? Why can't there just be a Dakota?
Patrice O'Neill was an unsung prophet, who was not appreciated enough. So I'm glad you ended on that note.
Josh, thank you so much for visiting our small-time rinky-dinky podcast. You are a big get for us.
Yeah, and thanks again for putting up with, the nonsense of my computer system. So I appreciate that again. The more so I feel very embarrassed about that, but again, thank you.
You're welcome, and no problem. I appreciate you guys inviting me on. This has been really fun.
Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Free the Bear podcast. Thank you very much for listening. If you can, give it a thumbs up. Even if you didn't like it, give it that good old thumbs up and subscribe. I'm very old, but I've been told there is a bell that you're supposed to push or ding or something. So do that. For more information about the California National Party, go to californianational.party or on Twitter, vote_CNP. And in conclusion,
Free the bear. Grrr.